share my. I would like to share my screen. Is that okay? I see host disabled, participant screen sharing. So apparently I cannot share my screen.
Can you try again? I made you the co-host.
Oh, okay. Here we go. All right. All right. So the title of our workshop tonight is Outline a Speech in 5 minutes. Can you see the PowerPoint slides? Okay. I don't know, this has happened to me many times when I was in Toastmasters. One of the speakers, gets stuck in traffic or gets sick at the last minute or has to work late or something like that. The Toastmaster comes to you in a big panic and says, "Hey, can you do a speech tonight?" Have you ever been in that situation? Well, this is for you. This is how to outline a speech in 5 minutes. And before we get into how to do it, I want to set a couple of the expectations to kind of lower the expectations. One is that keep in mind that this won't be the best speech you ever gave. It's not going to make you the international best speaker winner. It's not going to win you a district or a regional prize or anything. It's not going to be the best speech you ever gave. And the second warning is that it's not going to carry you through a 30-minute presentation. So if you have to make a 30-minute presentation at work, you actually have to know your subject. And so these techniques are not going to help you in that situation. You're going to have to actually know what you're talking about. It will, however, work for a 6-minute speech, which is about the average length of a speech at Toastmasters. And the TMOE, the Toastmaster of the evening, is going to love you forever because, when the Toastmaster of the evening was having that big moment of panic, you came through. So it's not going to make you a prize winner. It's not going to carry you through a 30-minute speech, but it is going to help you in this situation. Step one is to start with a time shift phrase. And what I mean by time shift phrase is a phrase like, the other day or last week or yesterday or last year, something like that. And the reason for that is that time shift phrases, they remind people of story time with mom and dad. They relax people and they make people more receptive to information. They make people listen better. So starting with a time shift phrase, it kind of puts them in that childlike listening to mom and dad frame of mind. So the very first words out of your mouth should be a time shift phrase. And again, by time shift, I mean, last week, yesterday, the other day, something like that. It doesn't need to be very specific. And step two, and we're still on the opening sentence, is to work a question into the same opening sentence. And the reason that you work a question into the opening sentence, before we get to the reason, I want to give you an example. So this is what the opening sentence of your speech might look like. The other day, time shift. The other day, I found myself asking, how do bees know where to go? How do bees know where to go? So you've got a time shift phrase and you've got a question. And the reason that you work a question into that opening sentence is that the human brain, it's a question answering machine. That's like its whole reason for existence. That's how it pays for its evolutionary freight, because the body has to give a lot of energy to the brain. The brain has to do something to justify its existence, and so it answers questions. And so if you open your speech with a question, the audience's brains will be naturally following along and trying to answer the question along with you. And so next, you've opened your speech, and with the opening sentence, you've got a time shift phrase, and then you've got a question. And for the next sentence, the second sentence, just launch into a short mini story. And by mini story, I mean, not a long story that lasts 20 minutes, just a short story that's maybe 2 or 3 sentences. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. And repeat the question. And again, it's the same reason. The human brain is a question answering machine, but you're repeating it because maybe the audience members, they were distracted by something when you said your question in the very first sentence. And so now by repeating it again, you're just kind of doing them a little favor. So first sentence, time shift phrase, and then question. And then in the second sentence, you begin a mini story. And here's an example of what that mini story might be. I stepped outside of a Starbucks and a bee flew in my face. And after I waved it away, I started wondering, how does he know where to go? It's a short sentence or a short story. It doesn't tell anybody a whole lot of stuff. It tells them that, okay, you're standing outside of Starbucks and there's a bee. And since you're outside of Starbucks, you probably have a coffee in your hand. That's really all the mini story has. Or the point of having a mini story is because you've opened with the time shift phrase, which put the audience in that kind of childlike listening to a story frame of mind. And now you have to actually work some story elements into your speech. And then just spend the rest of the speech answering the question. The thing about these speeches is that the actual subject matter, how do bees know where to go? You can talk about other stuff too. You can talk about just the boring details of daily life, like how to change a tire or how to change a air filter on your drying machine, or pretty much anything. The story itself does not have to be interesting because you've already put people into that childlike frame of mind and you've already started their brain working. At that point, you can say pretty much anything, and they'll go along with you. And a lot of times, like for this speech, about how do bees know where to go, you might draw on something that you read in Wikipedia, 20 years ago or 10 years ago. When you were doing some geeky research, remember your speech only lasts for 6 minutes, and you don't have to know everything about bees. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable person in the world. You just have to be able to fill up 6 minutes of time. That's all the TMOE is looking for. And during your speech, throw in some personal details about how you react in a situation, so that people can see the outline of your personality. And I recommend doing this at least once every 2 minutes. The audience members, they might not care about bees or air filters on dryers or changing tires on cars. They might not care about any of that stuff, but what they probably care about deeply is, who the hell is this person standing up in front of the room speaking? Who is this person? And so throw in some details that are related to your story. Like if you're talking about researching bees, talk about how the internet went down while you were doing your research. And actually, it doesn't really matter if the internet actually went down or not. That's not the point. The point is that people want to see how you react to a certain situation. So, so you might say, the internet went down and I got really angry because, you know, when things don't go my way, I tend to get really angry. My wife tells me that this is one of my greatest weaknesses. Or you could go the other way with it. Say the internet went down and, you know, I'm taking this yoga class and I remember that, okay, when something bad happens, just stop and take a deep breath. And nobody cares about your bees. Nobody cares about your internet connection. Maybe they care that you're taking a yoga class. They probably don't even care about that. But what they do care about is, like, how do you react to a situation? If your internet goes down, how do you react? If a fire starts in your kitchen, how do you react? That's what people want to know, is how do you react to stuff? And then the last tip. So, oh, by the way, back up a second. So remember, about every 2 minutes, at least every 2 minutes, you're throwing in a little personal story. So if your speech is about 6 minutes, personal story every 2 minutes. So you'll need about 3 personal stories for your speech. So if the Toastmaster comes up to you and says, hey, can you do a speech in, you know, in a few minutes? Basically what you're going to need to put together in the next 60 seconds is, okay, what's my time shift phrase? That'll just take a couple seconds. What's the research story that I'm going to describe? In this case, it's talking about bee navigation. And then the main part will be, what are the 3 personal details that I can tie back to the story? Those are the things that you're going to need to know, or those are the things that you're going to need to put together in the 5 minutes before you walk up to the stage. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention was that the thing to remember, or another thing to remember, is that the story doesn't need to be true. Maybe you were never at the Starbucks. Maybe you never researched about why bees fly where they fly. Maybe you never researched about changing the air filter on a dryer. Maybe you never did any of this stuff, but those things don't actually need to be true. You're the only one who knows that none of this stuff is true. However, they do need to be believable. Even if they're not true, they need to be believable, so that your audience, because your audience will be asking, okay, does this person actually go to Starbucks? Does he actually have a home? Does he have a computer? You know, if you obviously never go to Starbucks, or if you obviously don't have a home, or if you obviously don't have a computer, and all of a sudden you start talking about walking out of Starbucks and doing research on the internet, nobody's going to believe you. So the details of your story none of them have to be true, but they all need to be believable. Okay, and so that's the core of outlining a speech in 5 minutes. And so now we're going to do a little exercise where we actually outline a speech. So nobody's going to have to give a speech. We're not going to ask that of you tonight, but everybody's going to outline a speech. So do you have a pen and a piece of paper? Everybody's on mute, so I can't hear you. Do you guys have a pen and a piece of paper?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So let's go back to the first step. By the way, before we outline this speech, are there any questions at this point? No. Okay. If you have some questions at some point, feel free to ask at any time. You don't need to wait for me to say, are there any questions? Okay. So let's start out with the first step, the time shift phrase. Take out your pen and your piece of paper and just write down a time shift phrase. And then Ashul, why don't you tell me what time shift phrase you used?
I used 2 days ago.
2 days ago, excellent. And Tuana, what time shift phrase did you use?
Last week.
Ah, excellent, excellent. All right, so we've got 2 days ago and we've got last week, a couple excellent time shift phrases. Okay. Now, for the second part of the opening sentence, we need to work in a question. So take a moment and just work in a question. It doesn't have to be the most brilliant question that mankind has ever asked. It could be a very simple, very boring question. How do washing machines work?
Matt, do we need to ask a question? For example, I wrote, I never thought I would save a life. Something like that. Is it okay?
Yeah. Do you have a time shift phrase, or is that your
morning
full first sentence? Okay. Can you say that again, Jemry? Read that again.
This morning,
Uh-huh.
I never thought I would save a life.
Ooh. That's a good one. And it's also a good question. I mean, Jemry, it's a good question. Does this part need to actually be a question? And I guess no. The point is to make your audience's brains start working. And so you don't have to actually ask the question yourself. If what you say causes the audience to ask a question, that's good enough. Jemry, can you read your sentence again?
This morning, I never thought I would save a life.
Excellent. So now the audience's brain is going to start working. Even though Jemry didn't ask a question, now they're going to think, okay, well, what happened to Jemry? What's she going to do next? Why was her life in danger? So she's achieved the same purpose. She's got their brains working by, the audience has asked a question. Jemry didn't have to ask a question. The audience asked a question, and now their brains are going to be busy answering it. Ashul, what question did you ask?
I asked myself, why is the first time doing a thing is a scary thing?
Ooh, so what's your full sentence?
2 days ago, I asked myself, why is the first time doing a thing is a scary thing?
Ooh, nice. Okay. And Tuana, what do you have?
I have, last week I was thinking about how can I take back my Instagram account from hackers?
Ooh, how can I take back my Instagram account from hackers? These are a couple great challenges because Jemry has something very dramatic. You know, she's got a life-threatening event. She's trying to stay alive, and Tuana is just trying to do her Instagram account. So we've got, so Cemre has like a beautiful example that's going to be easy to work with, and Tuana has an equally beautiful example that's going to be challenging to work with. So I like where we're going with this. Okay. So we've got examples from Şol, Tuana, and Cemre. All right, so the next is to launch into a short mini story about what was happening when you asked yourself this question. And again, mini story, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, it could even be 1 sentence. It doesn't need to be long. So take a few minutes and write down your sentences. Şol, you look like you're about done there. Do you have your sentences written? What do you have?
Yes, it's written. Yeah, I can read. Doing a public speaking, it was not my thing, but I had to do it, so I did it.
Great. And why don't you read it from the very beginning, the very first words?
Yeah, sure. 2 days ago, I asked myself, why is first time doing a thing is a scary thing? Doing a public speaking was not my thing, but I had to do it, so I did it.
Excellent. That's an excellent beginning. And one thing to watch out for, this is just my personal advice. I don't know if this is if everybody at Toastmasters would agree with this, but personally, I think that because Toastmasters is primarily a public speaking club, even though the video that we just watched said it's not, even though since Toastmasters is primarily a public speaking club, most of the people in there are going to have resolved this issue. So they might speed ahead and get kind of lazy listening to you because they'll be thinking of how they got over their fear of public speaking. And, oh yeah, that's probably how the Şol did it. And end of speech, let's go have some cookies now. So they might not listen to you. So be careful with this. This is just my personal opinion. Be careful with this subject because if you use a subject that no one has asked before, at least they'll listen out of curiosity. But if you ask a question that pretty much everyone in the room has dealt with before, they might not listen to you as carefully. So your topic might work very well, and it might not. So just beware. Tuana, what do you have?
My phone was full of messages from my old friends that I never see many years. They were all asking, is there a problem with your social media accounts? Then I asked again and again, how can I take my Instagram account from hackers?
Excellent. And then Cemre, the one who had a life-threatening event. What do you have? Why don't you read yours from the beginning?
Okay. This morning, I never thought I would save a life. I was going to my work as usual. I walked to my office. On the way, I realized there were butterflies inside the decorative pool. I might be late, but I thought, what if they were alive? And I used my cart to take them out. And guess what? They started to move their wings, and I save them.
Okay, excellent. At this point, it starts to turn from science to art, because everybody's going to have a different style. Remember that the main point of the story, though, at this point, because these are just the opening sentences of your speech, you don't have to explain a lot in your story. In fact, you don't have to explain anything. The point of telling a story at this point is just to keep their brain working. Remember, you in your opening sentence, you asked a question to get their brain going. And now in the second sentence, or in this mini story, you're basically just giving them the data that they need to continue painting a picture. Oh, Matt was standing outside of a Starbucks, and then they can imagine the green Starbucks sign, and they can imagine Matt holding a cup of coffee. And I talk about a bee flying in front of my face. People can imagine, me trying to wave the bee away without using the hand that's holding the hot cup of coffee. So the point of this sentence, of this mini story, is just to get their brain into the mood to start painting pictures. You don't have to be a professional storyteller to get through this section. Okay. And so then spend the rest of the speech just answering the question. And at this point, and remember how you do this, it's not really that important. How you answer the question, it's really not that important because of a number of things. One is that you're not going to win any awards with this speech. You're basically just making the Toastmaster happy by filling in some time. But the reason that your story, the reason that what you do next or what you say next doesn't really matter that much is because of these personal details, because this is what the audience is really listening for. So, because they want to know, okay, what is the personality of the show like? What is the personality of Tuana like? Or what is the personality of Jemry like? They want to know, how does this person act in a situation? So just don't worry about writing your whole story out right now. Just think about the 3 personal details that you might want to work into the story and write those down. So take out your pen and write down, what are the 3 personal details that you might want to work into your story? As always, it looks like Işıl is the first person to finish. What are the 3 details that you would like to work in, Işıl?
Yeah, I can share. The question comes after the first story is what was the point of all of this? So I decided to go with my courage, use my courage, and go on the stage, connect with people. And after that, all the little accidents, I motivated myself. So that was a productive day for me and the group which I presented my ideas.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Shul, how one of the key points that you want to do when you're writing down these three personal details, I mean, not here in this workshop, but when you're sitting in the Toastmasters meeting and the TMOE has just asked you if you can give a speech tonight. One of the things that you want to do with these personal details, these three personal details are kind of outlining your story, because you've got to think, okay, here I want to mention this personal detail, and in order to mention that personal detail, I'm going to have to say this. For example, I want to talk, one of the personal details of my B example is how does Matt act in a stressful situation? So I'm describing how I act in a stressful situation. And in order to do that, I'm going to mention that my internet went down while I was researching the answer. So Jemre, when you now, I'm going to ask you the same question. What are your three details? And when you mention, or when you tell us what your three details are, also tell us what surrounds them. What's the context of them? Why are you mentioning them? Does that make any sense?
I think so, but I couldn't actually. I can tell you what I wrote because this is my thinking, so I thought that it would be okay. I saved the butterflies. Then I realized that there were many people who follow same route. None of them saw the butterflies in the pool. Or worse, they saw and they don't care.
Okay. This is nice. We've got one of the personal details that we're picking up about Jemre is that she cares about other living beings, even if they're not humans. And so in Jemre's speech, we're learning something about Jemre. It doesn't matter what Jemre is talking about. Actually, Jemre happens to be talking about something very interesting. But even if it wasn't interesting, at least we would be learning something about Jemre. So that's a good start. Tawana, what do you have, Tawana, for your three personal details?
Not three personal details, but I can also read what I wrote because it explains me. I was so panicked. I started to call people to don't answer my Instagram messages. I sent a message to Facebook, called a lawyer, then found myself in the notary for solving the case, doing everything that I could do to take it back.
This is a good example because from this, remember the point of giving the audience these personal details is that the audience wants to learn about you. How do you react to a situation? And from this, we're learning that Tawana reacts. I mean, she's worried about her reputation. She's calling in a lawyer. So she calls in some authorities, but she also worries about her reputation. So the audience is learning something, even though Tawana's story is just about getting her Instagram account hacked. We're learning about Tawana. And again, it doesn't really matter that much what happens with Tawana's Instagram account. We as the audience just want to know some personal details about Tawana. And so that's an excellent combination. And the last thing to remember, that your story doesn't need to be true. Look through your examples, look through what you've written down so far, and is all of it true, or did you invent any part of it? Take a few minutes to look through what you've written down and just ask yourself, is all of this true, or did I invent some of it? What do you have, Ashol? Did you see anything that you invented?
Oh, it was all
Not
true.
seen anything, but for example, I can end it like that.
Say that again, Jemre.
I didn't create any additional idea. All was real. But maybe, as you said, it would be better ending if I say, when I was returning to home, guess what? The butterfly find me, which I saved. And just...
and how the butterfly and I are best friends ever.
Saluted me and just fly away. Something like that. I can end it like this.
So remember at this point, so it's great if all of the elements of your story are true. Like Ashol was not able to find anything that was false. That's perfectly fine. You don't need to have it false stuff. Just remember that if you do have some false stuff, don't worry about it too much. As long as it's believable, that's all that people need. Like if Jemre stood up there and said, oh, and then I saw the same butterfly, and then people think, oh, wow, Jemre's not being true here. And then if she went even further and said, and now that butterfly and I are best friends, then people would say, oh, Jemre, I don't believe this anymore. So it's great if every element of your story is true. But if it's not, don't worry about it too much. The real question to ask yourself is it believable? And if it's believable, then that's good enough. So to sum up, thank you very much, by the way, for volunteering, or you didn't actually volunteer. I called on you, Ashol, Tuana, and Jemre. But thank you very much for being my test subject. So let's sum this up real quick. One is to reset your expectations. It's not going to be the best speech you ever gave. It's not going to win any worldwide awards. And number two, it's not going to carry you through a 30-minute presentation. If you have to give a 30-minute presentation, this is not going to work. You'll sound like an idiot. In a 30-minute presentation, you have to actually know what you're talking about. You don't have room to invent stuff like we're inventing here. So remember that this just has a very specific application, and that is a Toastmaster speech. All you have to do is get up there and speak for 6 minutes and help the Toastmaster out. That's all you have to do. And then we go through the steps of how to do it. All right, so before I wrap it up and hand it back over to Meltem, do we have any other questions at this point?
It was great experience, Matt. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. My pleasure.
I have one question.
Yeah, go for it.
I found it very interesting that I didn't came up with any, I just came up with a real story other than making up something else. Like, is there a reason for it? Maybe it's weird. So I didn't get that. Yeah.
If you start out with the basics of a time shift phrase and asking a question, or like Jemre did, saying something that makes people ask a question, that's half the battle right there. Relax people, put them in the frame of mind to listen to you and get their brains working. And then the second sentence, the mini story, that gets their brains, you know, painting a picture, and it doesn't have to be a complicated picture. It can be a picture of you standing outside of Starbucks, or in Jemre's case, it could be a picture of Jemre surrounded by butterflies, or in Ashul's case, it could be like walking up onto the stage at Toastmasters or something. If you accomplish those three things, or I guess it's just two things, relax them, get their brains working. That's two things. If you accomplish those two things, that's half the battle right there. And then give them some personal details, 3 personal details, and you take care of most of the rest of the half. And then, like I said, you're not going to win any awards for this, but the Toastmaster of the evening is going to love you for it. So yeah, thank you, Ashul. And before I turn it over to Melton, do we have any other questions?
Yes, I had a question.
Sure, go for it.
My name is Ida.
Yeah.
My name is Ida King, and I came in late. That's why I have a question. I'm sorry. The time just kind of slipped by me. But so I have, for step 1, you have a time phrase, and such as the other day or last week or something to that effect. For step number 2, I have ask a question or say something that makes people ask a question.
Yeah.
And step 3, I have launch into a short mini story and repeat the question periodically. Okay. So are those the only 3 steps that I needed, or I thought there was 5 steps.
Those are the opening steps. Those are the opening steps. It's definitely not going to carry you through the whole speech. In a 6-minute speech, those 3 things are going to give you at most a minute. So most of the speech is going to be in how you answer the question that you've asked. And the thing to remember there, I think, is that the answer to the question is only of secondary or maybe even at most tertiary importance, because the main thing that the audience is wondering at this point is, can you give us some personal details? What is this person like? And so if you throw in, 3 personal details, or at least 1 personal detail every couple of minutes, that'll string them along.
Yeah. And actually, most times, if you have 2 to 3 points that you're making, you have a 5-minute speech.
Yeah. It doesn't, if your main job is to fill up 5 or 6 minutes,
yeah,
you could basically get up there and pick your nose for 5 or 6 minutes. It's not that hard to fill up 5 or 6 minutes of speaking time.
Yeah, because to give you an example, I mean, if we have time, can I kind of share what I wrote?
Sure, go for it.
And of course, my time phrase was the other day. And with my question, I asked myself, how do I make a I forgot. I didn't even write this. A 2-ingredient biscuit recipe, because it's supposed to be 2-ingredient, and I have a 2-ingredient biscuit recipe into a sweet potato biscuit recipe. That was my question.
Okay.
And I have a whole story behind that, because I actually did do this. So then for my first point, I'm going to share with them something about me, and that is that I love sweet potatoes. And then I'll talk a little bit about the different types of ways that I like to eat sweet potatoes. So that's why I said that I end up taking a little bit of time sharing with them that. Then my second point was the fact that I was given a bunch of sweet potatoes of many sizes. And I said, some were small, some were small as the size of a tennis ball, and some were large, kind of reminded me of a soccer ball. And this was all given to me at the farmer's market. So those were 2 points that I made. So that's what I'm saying. So as I develop this type of thing, and then I had one more point, but I didn't write the other point yet. I have to think about that. But just that type of thing. and I'm going to be talking about how to make this sweet potato recipe.
Yeah, and the benefit of that is that now the audience is doing a couple things. One is they're with your personal details, with your personal, these little, they're not even stories, they're just little anecdotes that you're throwing into your bigger story. They're learning something about you. And they're also, you've got some imagery going on, so their brains are still working because they have to imagine like the size of a tennis ball, the size of a soccer ball. They are imagining the fuzz on a tennis ball. So they're imagining little details of things that they're taking these little things that you're giving them, and they're throwing their own details onto them. And so you're doing a little bit of work. The audience is doing most of the work. They're doing most of the heavy lifting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yep. And then after that, I'll describe the ingredients that I had to put together in order to make this and some of the process behind it. But I'll give them a short version of how I actually made these biscuits.
Okay. Yeah. So before I turn it back over to Meltem, other questions?
Hi, Matt.
It looks like I do.
have a question to my dear mentor.
Yes. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Matt is my dear mentor at Toastmasters for years. So I have a question. You know, I'm big on closing sentences. In Toastmasters, we really put so much emphasis on the opening sentences, which is great, but not the same for the closing sentences. So what's your take on that? What would be the approach to give a really, really powerful ending to a speech?
For this speech, like I think
for any speech, actually.
Well, for like a speech that you have some time to work on, a speech that you have time to dig a little more deep or a little more deeply emotionally, you're gonna find more material for a powerful closing. For a speech like this, you might not find that powerful a closing. And again, the main job of a speech like this is just to make the Toastmaster of the evening happy by filling up some time. And so maybe the best that you can do for a closing, for a speech like this, maybe the best you can do is just to end with what you took away from this situation. And in my example, it's like, why do bees fly where they do? It doesn't even have to be about that. It could be about something that I learned when my internet went down, and I freaked out. Maybe it was something that my wife said to me. Maybe that's the main thing that I took away from this experience. So maybe in a speech like this, you're not going to come up with that ground buster or barn buster phrase that makes everybody go, oh my God, this person is the most brilliant person who ever existed. Maybe you're not going to find that. Maybe you're just going to, maybe the best you can do is just to close with a sentence describing what you took away from this experience.
Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, as Tuba mentioned, when I was involved in Istanbul Toastmasters a few years ago, Tuba was one of my mentees, and it was probably one of my best mentees because like there are mentees who you help out through a couple meetings and then you never see or talk to them again. And then there are mentees who you help for years, and they help you as much as you help them. And Tuba is definitely one of those mentees.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was an amazing experience. And I never forget, I mean, the best, I mean, I'll tie this advice of you to the presentation that you've just given. This, I mean, the best piece of advice I ever got about public speaking, actually in life, in general, generally in life, it is this: whatever speech you give tuba, remember this, put some tuba in it. Remember that? So that really
I don't think I'll ever forget that one.
Yeah, you said that people would like to learn about you and just put some personal details, just you said today. So it's the same thing, and I never forget that. And it works like magic.
Excellent.
Yeah, a personal story, this is my one piece which I got from Toastmasters experience. It is that any personal story, whatever it is the best story, and it is way more impactful than any story that you can find on Google.
Yeah. All right. It's good to know that many years later, that was the main lesson you took away from it. That's good to know.
Thanks.
So let me turn it back to Meltem. Meltem, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
Thanks.